Hey, everybody. Maybe we got going on right. Very good. I want to say wait a couple minutes, I guess, to get people in.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, cool. I guess while other people are joining, James, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and kind of what you do that you're able to talk about?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I don't feel like going to jail, so I will only talk when I can. If that's okay. Yeah, all right. So, hey, everybody who is on currently. I am James deGrood. I'm a computer scientist with the FBI. And what that means is essentially I'm a nerd for cyber cases. First of all, Patrick, is my mic on? I don't have like an indicator on my screen, so I just want to make sure that my voice is coming through.
Yeah, it is.
Cool.
I'm clear.
All right. So what that means essentially is like 6 or so years ago, like there weren't computer scientists in the Bureau. Maybe it was like 7, doesn't matter. Some time ago, there were not computer scientists in the Bureau. And typically the way it worked is that people were just assigned to be on cyber squads. And good or bad, it was just like, hey, you're going to be working cyber cases. And what the Bureau realized they needed is they just needed people who like would geek out on cyber stuff. And so that's what I do. My job is to just geek out on cyber stuff and to fill whatever gaps exist, technically speaking, in cyber investigation. So whatever I need to do, whether it's DFIR stuff, which is digital forensic incident response, network analysis, any sort of log analysis, and that could be, like we're talking about PCAP, NetFlow, IDS logs, whatever needs to be done. I will wear whatever hat I need to wear. So that's what I do. I do all the things. And so I am I have a wide range of experience when it comes to cyber cases. I've helped out with some BEC cases, like business email compromise stuff. I've done nation state related things. I've done things related to hospitals, to energy sector, to companies. I've seen a lot. I've been in the Bureau for about 4 years now, and it's been pretty interesting so far. So yeah, and throughout this talk, I really like Q&A, and this is different because it's not live. It's on Zoom, but I'm totally happy with questions. So if you have questions for me, feel free to ask, and I'll be able to answer them.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody that's joining, this is James deGrood with the FBI. He's a computer scientist, and he's based out of the Atlanta area. If you have any questions, you can use the Q&A section in Zoom, and that we'll get those answered. And I'm going to turn it over to James.
All right. So thank you, Charles, for the question. I will answer questions. I'm happy to. I'm going to do just a little bit I prepared first, and then I can do more prepared if no questions come up with, but I'll do like another little intro right now. Then I'll get back to that question. So the whole reason why I'm here talking with you guys is because what we try to do better is talk with private sector people, with and any entities. I don't care if you run like any sort of like virtual server platform. I don't care if you hospital, energy, whatever your company does, even if it's like not computer related, but it's just like a big business that you guys have a lot of employees, and if a cyber attack happens, it'd be bad news bears for a lot of people. Like, we care, and we want to be able to be accessible to you guys in the event that something happens. So I like to reach out. I like to talk with the public when I get a chance to show you that, hey, we're just people, like you can definitely just reach out to me if you need to, and then we can talk about, if you have issues and what we can do to help you out with. So first and foremost, if you get hacked, and I say hacked very loosely, it can be a million things, but so if you get hacked, I am not going to kick down your door, right? I have no interest in doing that. Like, if you're a victim, keep in mind, we're going to treat you like a victim. So, we're not going to go in there guns blazing and then just rip your servers off the walls, like we're out of the, racks. Like, we are there to help you. So we will be as hands off as we need to. We actually prefer to be hands off for liability reasons anyway. And we will work with you in whatever capacity makes most sense for your business in order to see how we can best help you in your situation. So our counterpart to this when it comes to incident response is Department of Homeland Security, the DHS, specifically CISA, and they exist for especially things like if you're a power plant or what have you, and you get hacked, they are there to be there hands-on and try to help assess physically what's going on and help stop the bleeding. We don't do that, and again, that's more of a liability thing. But not only that, there's everyone's roles and responsibilities as far as what our lane in the road is. So what we do, I like to use a metaphor of a burning building, right? So if an arsonist sets a building on fire, the police are going to want to catch the arsonist, but they don't have the resources, nor do they intend to have the resources to help put out the fire of that building. That's just not their lane at all. That's what the firefighters are for, right? The firefighters exist to put out the fire and then to help people inside and that sort of thing. So that's the DHS is more like the firefighters in that scenario, and we're the police officers. We care very much who hacked you, but we just don't help you stop the bleeding when it comes to your compromised network. And unfortunately, what that means is a lot of people see that and they're like, okay, that's great that they're after the bad guy, but all they get when I say that is okay, well, they're not going to really help me. They just want to help the bad guys, but then I still have to deal with all my own problems. And that's not a great way to interpret it, because there's a lot of benefit to us being there helping you and your incident response team if that happens. So think about this. So let's say you get compromised and you get ransomware in your whole network, or someone's in your network and they're extracting tons of data. You're gonna want to call some sort of incident response team, which should be your first step. Any of the private sector ones, I'm not going to recommend any in particular, but so you're going to want an incident response team there to stop the bleeding, to figure out what happened, and to triage and to make sure get the attackers out of your network and secure whatever you can. So once they've done that, that's all well and good, but how long is it going to take them to do that? How long is it going to take them to figure out what actually happened? And then how do you know they're not going to come back, right? And so your mileage will vary based on whatever incident response company you hire. And it's not necessarily whether they're good or bad. You can get a great incident response company and you can get the same attacker come back in your network in a way that they just didn't perceive was going to happen. And not only that, incident response can take a long time. It just depends. Sometimes it's just luck, depending on if they looked in the right place, the right time or not. So that is a benefit that we bring to the table when it comes to companies getting, having their computers intruded. I say computer intrusion because that's what we call it, but I'll say hacked. So so if your company gets hacked, that's benefit to us being a part of it. Because understand this, we are law enforcement, right? We are the highest tier of the U.S. law enforcement as far as that goes. So we have the power to serve legal process. We can do subpoenas to companies and we can perform search warrants when need be. There was a case that I worked where this hospital was compromised, and I can't say too much about it in detail because the case is still technically ongoing. We're just waiting on the indictment to go through. This hospital was compromised, and we were able to help the incident response team and how they went about figuring out what was going on with it, because we had together kind of identified a subject, and then we were able to carry out the search warrant on that subject. We got his, like, we did a search warrant of his like house. We seized all his electronic devices. So we got his phones and his computers and stuff like that. And then I was able to analyze them. And then I was able to help better steer the incident response team with what they were looking for. Because, and mind you, I can't just like, it's not like I'm just going to turn over images of like, the evidence because of the innocent until proven guilty bit. But if I do find things that seem very bad or that's very relevant to the hospital's infrastructure, then that might help me be like, all right, look at this date range, like look at around this time. What do you see? And that'll better help the incident response team then determine from their logs and what they can see in the network logs of the hospital, what happened on their end, and not just what I see. So it's a collective help there. Let's see here. And not only that, and then, imagine cybercrime is not ever just down to one country, or rarely that's the case. Does it just contain to one country? Very often this, crosses barriers internationally. And that's just the nature of how this game is played. We have a lot of existing relationships with international law enforcement entities. And often we ask for their help when things cross borders and vice versa, and we're happy to do so. So that's another way in which we might have the ability to do things that your incident response team just simply does not. We can, so another main reason why I see a lot of companies not wanting to work with us is because they're afraid of their trade secrets getting out, which is totally understandable. With the states, we have FOIA, which is the Freedom of Information Act. So what that means is anything that's like government record potentially is FOIA-able. So like, citizens can then say, hey, government, I want to see what this was. And then they'll, redact what they need to, but then they have to turn over a certain part of it. So that being said, if something is someone's company's trade secrets, we can mark that as such when we get it, if we have to get it. So for instance, let's say I'll pick on Coke just because I'm in Atlanta. And so let's say Coke gets their secret formula stolen, God forbid. And so during our investigation, we actually get the subject, we get his stuff, and then we actually get the file that has all the Coke formula on it. Coke will not need to worry about their formula being FOIA'd, because if we get that and we see that in our evidence, we would clearly mark that as, this is trade secret, this must be protected from FOIA, and that is a solid reason why it cannot be FOIA'd. And for anyone who's concerned about that, still, I get it. I'm not an attorney, and if you're not an attorney, that's fine. Or even if you are, you can have your legal counsel talk to our legal counsel, and they can straighten that out and clear that out if you'd like to before you start working with any law enforcement on that. Consider who we are. We are the FBI, and by that I mean like we're not a private sector entity, and we don't make a profit off of you. I stand to make no amount of money more whether you choose to work with me or not. I'm simply just saying you should, because it would help you, and it would be better for us to get in on the ground floor of you being hacked than like months later coming into the picture with it. Yeah, I can stop there and just start answering questions. So a case I've worked, that's from Charles Peters. So one of the cases that I told you about, there's a hospital. I did help out with Equifax a little bit. I wasn't part of the main team on that, but I was there when it started, and I was helping out with some of the malware with that initially. So that was pretty interesting to see something like that. There are nation-state cases that I work, and that's pretty interesting because you hear about nation-state stuff and like in people's reports, whether it's FireEye or SecureWorks or what have you. But it's pretty cool to like see them like in action when they pop up. What other public cases have I worked? Unfortunately, when it comes to actually like sentencing someone and like getting it to the point where I can actually talk about something in the public, cases can take like 2 to 3 years to get all the way through the legal system. And so there's a number of cases that are pretty cool where I'm just waiting for indictments to happen so that we can sentence them, so we can move on to the legal process, but not quite there yet. Dr. Reed asks, I just want to take time. Oh, it's not a question. Dr. Reed, that's not a question. This is a question and answer panel. No, but thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, does anybody else have any questions for me about the FBI, how we work with people, the types of cases that we work, what our threshold is for working cases? And I don't know how this works as far as like, I don't know if I can see raised hands or if that's on Patrick or.
There are not currently any raised hands. When you're working on an incident with somebody who is,
Yeah.
you know, they do you also, and I know you're not, you know, you're not a private security firm, but do you also provide any consulting work, you know, to just kind of, or I guess advice while you're walking them through the process and helping them out to maybe beef up their own incident response plan for future incidents?
Yeah, so we can definitely recommend best practices in the industry with certain cases, and we're happy to do that much. The problem comes into play when we give more targeted advice, because that opens up to litigation, because we're a very litigious society, right? And then we have to be realistic about that. And that's just like that's the way of the world, is that especially in America, we're very litigious, and we hate to give a specific recommendation and say, hey, to help better stop this attack, you should block this port in your firewall, because then next week, if that company gets hacked again, there's a good chance they're going to be like, all right, we're going to sue you because you told us we'd be safe if we block this port. So we can recommend best practices, and we have talked in open settings with companies about maybe we'll go to their tabletop exercises in certain points, and we'll just give them recommendations based on, like, you know, ransomware deterrence and what they should be looking for as far as threat hunting goes. We've definitely helped out with that. So even if you're not in the middle of like your company being hacked and you have questions or you have concerns and you're like a bigger enterprise network, we're happy to talk things out with you as well as more of a preventative measure. That's a fine thing. We're happy to do for you.
Awesome, thank you. Looks like we've got a question from Bayer. For folks trying to get entry-level positions in cybersecurity on your teams, what skills, certs, or keywords do you look for on the resume or in interviews?
Yeah, that's cool. So I understand that certs are really expensive. Even like the, you know, like SANS can be like what, 7,000 a piece or something like that. And then like even like OSCP is like $2,000 or something. Don't quote me on that. Maybe it's 2,500 now. You know, but that's a lot of money for some people. So you don't necessarily need to get certs to get into cybersecurity. That being said, I'm not a hiring manager for like a private sector company, but you can certainly learn a lot outside of the world of certs. There's so many free like hacking things. There's like Hack the Box. There's like the Pico CTF challenges. All the time I'm seeing more and more free CTF things pop up online. And what I love about CTFs is that it's such a huge like breadth of cybersecurity. You know, you have like cryptography stuff. You have like you know, DFIR stuff. Network things, you know, data analytics, and that's really cool because then you can see what you like or don't like. And not many people in private sector world have to wear as many hats as I have to wear. A lot of people have more very specialized focus. Like some people that I know in Mandiant just sit there all day long and do reverse engineering malware because it's what they love to do, and that's cool. And if that's all you want to do, that's awesome. That's a really cool skill to have. But some people hate malware analysis, and people just want to look at network logs. Some people just want to configure network sensors and stuff like that. So there's so much in cybersecurity to do. So that's why I like doing CTFs on the front end, just to get a better idea of what you're interested in and what you like about cybersecurity. So then you can start focusing in on that. And if you like malware analysis, there's tons of old malware samples that exist online that you can download and see other people's analysis of. There's so many free resources out there. I hope that helped answer that question. Oh, you also asked about like, you know, what would you do for resumes and interviews and stuff like that. Definitely Google's your friend, man. Like Google or person, Google's your friend. You know, like you can definitely search like cybersecurity interview questions and just get a good idea of like what people ask for in cybersecurity interviews, and then that'll better help you understand maybe what skills you're lacking and then what you can better, you know, work on. As far as like resume goes, people want to know that you're interested in this stuff. And so honestly, if you're in this just for like a job, just to do if this isn't like really interesting to you, it's probably not the right field, because this stuff gets so deep, this stuff is so interesting and it changes all the time, you need to actually be interested and find it interesting and fun. And that should show in your resume in some way, shape, or form. And that should show like when you interview with people. And I think that helps a lot too.
Cool. And then Ray was, she was wondering, from that question, what are the most valuable certifications that the FBI looks for? And also, does the FBI prefer graduates from, say, grad school or more non-traditional backgrounds?
Yeah, well, because it's government, you start out at a higher pay scale for coming out of grad school because it's just a government pay scale thing. But I don't think, no, because I've done a lot of interviews, and no, it's not part of our scoring rubric. Like, you don't like do better for interviews or anything like that if you've gone through grad school. Now, sure, like if you've taken certs, if you have some SAN certs or OSCP behind you, that's great. And that'll definitely help you with the interview process, but we definitely don't have any certification requirements going into it. So we have hired people right out of college. We've hired people who come from private sector who want to just help out with the Bureau and take that pay cut. And, it could just because they like the mission better than they like their private sector gig. So there's just it's a mixed bag, but I will say this, as far as the computer scientist position goes, there's only like 120 or so positions in the whole FBI for a computer scientist, and that's over 56 field offices. So it's not like the most like common position in the Bureau. It is fun, but it's not like super common. There's new positions though. There's a digital operations specialist, which does a lot of this stuff as well, but there's no like research want or need for that position if you do that, which is, if you just like analysis and DFIR stuff, that's good for that. There's forensic examiners as well. Mileage may vary based on where you get placed there. And then there's also data analytics if you like just big data stuff. But then also you could just go and be an analyst or be an agent. And then if you have a cyber background, they'll probably throw you in cyber.
Very cool. Another one from someone named Anonymous Attendee. So I'm thinking about taking a master's program to change my career into cybersecurity. Data analysis and cybersecurity are two programs that I've seen. Are they worth it?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So it definitely depends on what college you go to. We have had interns come in, and that's probably where I get the most insight into these programs is from all the interns that I am over and like assign them to do things, what have you. So I've had some interns come in who, and I won't name colleges because that would just be mean, but who come in from decent schools and they're in their cybersecurity program, and I struggle to find what the actual cybersecurity part of their program is for their master's degree, because they're just like, I was like, okay, so do you like malware analysis? They're like, no. Do you do like, malware? Like, do you do forensic stuff like with like Windows or Mac? And they're like, no. And so it was really more business focused, and it turns out it was out of their college of business. And you just have to look at the programs and just really scrutinize what they're offering as far as their curriculum goes and see if that translates to actually valuable skills. Because especially in cybersecurity, the piece of paper you have hardly matters. Your skills matter way more than the piece of paper that you have. So if a master's program can get you those skills you're looking for, awesome. But you might be able to find other ways of obtaining those skill sets that don't require a master's degree. And I've seen a lot of companies now, some other bigger names that I know of, say that they are not worried about people having actual degrees anymore. They just want people who like nerd out on this stuff and are good at it more than anything. And so I think that's really important. If you choose a master's program, make sure it's worth the money. Oh, and as far as like data analytics goes, again, you really have to know what that data analytics program is going to offer you, because it could just be a bunch of buzzwords, right? They could, because if you're learning machine learning stuff, you better be learning actual machine learning stuff that you can freely implement anywhere. If they're teaching you how to use a tool that uses machine learning on the back end, that's not very valuable for most people. So be careful of that.
Very cool. And another question from here. Does the FBI hire folks without university degrees but can demonstrate cyber skills, which I think you may have answered this,
I wish. Yeah, I wish so much. And I totally get it. Like there are people who have no college degrees who could kill it in this sector. And I have no doubts about that. But we are the government, right? And so because of that, there are these there are these boxes you have to check, like on, on the paper when you apply and when you interview. And it's so annoying. And it's annoying to the point where some people's like computer science degree or cybersecurity degrees don't have enough math requirements. And there is a math requirement. Like you have to have so many hours of math in your bachelor's degree in order for it to count. And if you don't have, you could have a cybersecurity degree and be really good at the stuff. And if you don't have enough math credits, I think it's just like 4 courses of math or whatever. If you do like calc-based stats, you probably have enough. Then like you don't qualify, and that kills me. But that's a whole nother topic. So, but definitely, there's definitely private industry that have stopped caring so much about degrees.
Awesome. Thank you for that one. Porter asked, what is your opinion on a hackback law that would allow companies to go outside of their own networks to identify attackers? And should a company be allowed to go after attackers?
Great. Thank you for putting me on the spot with that question. All right. Thanks, Porter. Yeah. So let me take a cop out with that kind of sort of in a way that won't get me in trouble for answering this question. You got to ask yourself to what end? All right. So if a company, let's say they get hacked from a certain IP address and they hack back that the servers of that IP address. Okay. Like what have you accomplished? Like what's really happening there? That IP address is probably just some VPS they rented out temporarily anyway to do this attack with. So you hacking back that IP address, you're probably not even going to get attribution out of it. I don't really see a benefit in the first place, much less making it legal. I don't know what good that really does people in those situations.
Joe asks, hi James, with all the computer intrusion cases you've been involved so far, what is the main intrusion attack that you've seen used the most? I kind of want to be funny here and say, why is it social engineering? But
yeah.
Social engineering?
Yeah. So I think honestly what it is, so social engineering is very prevalent, right? Obviously. And I think more than, I'll say this. So I do see 0 days happening. I do see people taking advantage of like exploits that just come out. That is a thing. That being said, what's probably more prevalent than anything is just bad passwords. What I see a lot is passwords and like IP addresses with associated account certs, like username and passwords on sale in the darknet, and then somebody buys it, gets in there, sees what company it is, and then they just wreak havoc in that system. And that's how they got in, was just that the IT person just configured RDP access, and that computer with RDP is connected directly to the internet. And I've seen that on cases that I've worked where we come to find out that, oh, how they got into your network was because RDP was enabled and the username was 4 characters long and the password was the username. So yeah, of course they got in, and like I feel bad for you that they got in, but also come on. So yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Cool. I don't see any other questions yet. It's open. Also, the microphones are open, so we can also have discussion, anyone who's interested.
I'll say this too, if anyone here is ever like compromised, and let's say you run like a really small company, or it's not a minor, it's just a kind of a minor attack that happened, and it clearly wouldn't warrant us being involved in it. What you can do, if you don't want to do anything else, is please submit it to ic3.gov, and I'll put that in the chat window. And what that is, that's just a way for us, that's a repository for us to keep up with all of these smaller things that happen. And if we have reason to believe that a lot of the origination of a lot of these smaller attacks come from the same person, well, what in one instance, small instance, we might not be able to open a case up on, if we conglomerate all the relative small ones together as a whole, it's like, oh yeah, this is clearly worth opening a case on. But we can't do that without your help. If you don't tell us when you are compromised, if you don't tell us, when something bad happens to you, we can't help you and we can't know it exists. So we need you to do that whenever that happens.
Cool. Lee Scramstad has his hand up.
Cool.
Hey guys, how are you? You can hear me all right?
Yep.
Cool. So what you just mentioned about getting the data to you of when things happen, even if it's something that we wouldn't think or another company wouldn't think it would be pertinent. How can we even see, maybe not what happened or those notes, but how do we even see that, hey, there's a lot of data really getting put in here, so we will be able to use this, meaning FBI is going to be able to use this, whoever will be. So would that not perpetuate a little bit more of the sharing, because there's an ability to see, like, we've got 400 tips or something like that?
Yeah, so you guys don't have optics on that, and I totally get it, right? I get that. Like, it feels like you're screaming to a void, and I can totally understand that if you just submit it and you have no idea if it's going to go anywhere. But with a lot of laws that are in place, I don't. Maybe there is a solution to it, and that's just not thought of yet. And if you have ideas, you can just hit me up, and I can feed up the chain if it's something that seems easy to implement. But no, for right now, you just pretty much put in tips, and then if it's something that we currently have if it's something that we're already working, that we see that it's like, part of a relative case, you might immediately get reached out to by a case agent or someone who's working the case and be like, hey, we see you were just compromised. We're gonna go fly out and talk to you if that's cool, or something like that. But other than that, no, you probably wouldn't have optics to see if it's actually being pursued or not.
All right. So another quick update on that one. So it's great that you've brought this up, and I think hopefully us and CSNP will continue to perpetuate that message. Now I'm calling in from Canada. We've got our CSIS up here. So is there any sort of collaboration between the two?
Yeah, totally. I've worked with the Royal Mounted Police, Mounties. I've worked with them on previous cases that I've had too, where because this is a very international spectrum, right? Spectrum's the wrong word. This is a very international matter when you have cyber actors, because no one cares to just target someone within a certain country most of the time. This is money driven. Everyone is looking to turn a profit in cyber crime. So they don't care what country they land in. They just want to find someone they can take advantage of and leverage data if they can. So that being said, I've constantly worked with many different law enforcement, and particularly I have personally worked with the Mounties on a specific case that I've worked that I'm waiting for indictment on, and they were super nice as promised from the Canadians. And it was a nice experience, and most every cyber case that I've worked internationally with other law enforcement has been very fruitful.
All right, thank you very much.
Sure.
Thanks for that question, Lee. They are asked, when you start an investigation, what are the questions you ask and how do you proceed, especially when you don't have log servers of your own?
Yeah, so that's great. That's a really good question, because a lot of the new agents who come in, who are just people talking about who come to the FBI who necessarily don't know what cyber is, out of the gate. They show up, they're told to go show up to a victim site, and they really don't know what to do, which is fair because it's a totally different world than anything else. So what I usually start with is just asking the IT team or the incident response team, if someone's already on there, and be like, all right, what do you know as of right now? And kind of get their perspective on what's happening. And I make sure to ask probing questions. They'd be like, oh, well, we got ransomware. Okay, how do you know it's ransomware? And obviously that's not a great example, because usually it's pretty obvious if you have ransomware. But then they might say, oh, this computer was the one that was compromised. This is how they came in. Be like, okay, how do you know that? It's nice to have a theory, but let's dive into it. And then I'll more or less be a sounding board initially. And then I will, I'll help them. I'll ask for a network diagram or something to understand the network topology of the victim company. And then we go from there. So then it's anything from identifying everything on their network that could have logged what happened with the hack, anything that could have, any application logs from the different servers or computers to understand what has happened, during the incident, so we can have more data to go off of. Yeah, more data, the better, but a lot of companies only have default logging set on a lot of things. And honestly, what happens sometimes is we get victims and there's just nothing we can do because they don't have enough logging in place for us to determine what happened. We see the end result, but if you don't have a firewall or an IDS system of some sort that's logging something significant, there's nothing anyone can do about that. So sometimes it's difficult. Yeah.
Yeah. Log all the things.
Log all the things. Yeah.
Arshad asked, does age, is there an age limit to get into the roles in the cyber field in an organization or agency like FBI, Army, et cetera?
Well, certainly military there is. I'm not sure what their cutoff is, but I think that just depends on where you're at. Because they are actually a member of the military. Like there's in the FBI, only a third of the FBI are agents, right? We are not all agents. Only a third of us are. And then there's like analysts and there's staff operations specialists, which are pretty much analysts, but they're like more like a tactical analyst. There's data analysts, I mentioned a few others, and there's computer scientists. Like there's so many roles in the FBI. So that being said, there is definitely an age cutoff for when you can start being an agent, but I don't believe there's an age cutoff for like computer scientist roles. I haven't seen one if there is.
Cool. Porter asked, he asked a question. China has called for a new internet protocol where all users must use their real names. Do you think the internet would be safer if we eliminated anonymity?
So thank you for asking a question at the end of that I could actually answer, because I don't want to comment directly on China if you don't mind. So let's talk about like anonymity and the internet. I don't think that, how do I say this? I don't think that DNS over HTTPS is a great idea, because you're still, so what that is like, so currently right now, all your domain name, like all your domain requests, like to figure out, hey, what IP address does domain belong to, are more or less sent in the clear. And if someone is on your network, they can see all the domains you're calling out to, and so all the websites you're visiting or what have you. And people are like, I want privacy. So what we should do is we should encrypt all of those so people can't on the network see what domain names they're calling out to. But then what that would also mean is that your IDS can't see what domain names you're calling out to. That means your firewall can't see what domain names you're calling out to. And then that in turn makes it a lot less secure of a system, because then the security measures you have in place to detect if malware is running rampant in your system, or if someone's doing like, if someone's tunneling things out for DNS, that gets a lot more difficult if it's possible at that point. Another anonymity thing that I'll talk about is like VPN servers. There have been reports that nation states like own some VPN services. I saw that pop up the other day on, I guess it was a few months ago now, like some cyber news stuff, maybe Bleeping Computer or Twitter or something like that. And that's interesting to think about, because I mean, it makes sense, right? I mean, because what a VPN, all VPN server is that's just virtualized servers in which you set up a how do I say this best? You just set up a service on a virtualized server somewhere that's routing all your network traffic for you, and then whoever owns that service can see all of your network traffic in one place. So yeah, for an nation state to do that, yeah, that could make sense. I don't know whether that's true or not, but it certainly seems like a gold mine for them. And you don't know what that VPN company is doing with all of that data. That being said, there are ways for you to make your own VPN services if you just want to use it for security. At the end of the day, you can't guarantee that means you're anonymous on the internet. But then if we want to talk about something that's actually anonymous with Tor, I don't think Tor in itself is entirely a bad thing. Tor can be used for good purposes. Tor can be used for people in countries whose governments don't allow them to receive any news source that they want. Tor is one of the ways in which they have been able to get other countries' news sources to see what's going on in the world. And so as an American, for someone who enjoys like the freedoms that were offered, I like the thought that other people have the freedom of information in that way for Tor. Now, obviously, Tor is also used for terrible things. The darknet markets aren't great with making drugs super accessible to people. I'm not personally a fan of. I mean, I think that's kind of a bummer. And especially with the child porn stuff, I mean, there's a lot of that on Tor as well. And we can't have that conversation and not acknowledge that Tor is used for bad things, and it does make it more difficult to find them and prosecute them. So it's just like it's a double-edged sword, honestly, with privacy.
Hector asked, do you have a LinkedIn contact information to send a question? And I'm assuming this is for James, right, Hector?
Yeah, yeah. Yes. Okay. So James deGrood is not a very common last name in America. So if you just search James deGrood on LinkedIn, I'm the guy with like the cartoony face. I think maybe even my LinkedIn URL is just like whatever / James deGrood. So yeah, if you just Google that, and I'll just type my name in here in case you need it. You'll find me, and I'm fine with that. And for anyone who's on this call, like if you are looking for a point of contact at your local FBI office, if you're like on this call and you're not in Georgia, I wouldn't necessarily, you're not in my area of responsibility is what I'm saying. My area of responsibility being from the Atlanta field office is the entire state of Georgia. So, if you're in Mississippi, I would, forward your information to people I know there, and then they would reach out and make initial contact with you or wherever you're at in the States. Even Puerto Rico, we have a field office in Puerto Rico. So if anyone's in Puerto Rico, hola. And I know people over there I can send you to.
Arshad asked, what kind of soft and technical skill set are you looking for an entry-level role as a first security responder or an incident responder?
Yeah, so there's a lot of things that you can do. There's so many like webinars that you can watch. You can just type in like cybersecurity webinar on Google, because I don't want to risk like, recommending a certain company over another. But I've looked at some in the past, and even if somebody else on the chat wants to recommend some, I mean, yeah, you guys should definitely recommend like your learning resources to each other, because there's a lot out there. I'm sure I don't know all the good ones. But there's so many free resources available. And again, what I was talking about earlier is like find what you're interested in and then go from there. Like I don't get to do a lot of threat hunting, like actually in my work, because that requires a lot of network data to look at, right? And usually by the time I get network data, it's already filtered down to a very specific amount of network data relative to the subject that we're after. But I think it's a really cool thing to do. So what I've done at home is I've set up I've bought like Raspberry Pis, and I bought like an Intel NUC, which is just a very small PC. And I'm running my own firewall on there, and like on the Raspberry Pis, I've got like network sensors on there, and I'm collecting and aggregating log data from my home network, and I'm just playing with that. And I'm running various tools to get used to that. So that's a really cool way to, first of all, have fun, to make your internet like way more secure on your local network, to have practice with your own threat hunting, to identify, what bad stuff might look like, and to have a really marketable skill set as well. So that's one idea. Also, and it's really dependent on what you want to do, but also if you're going to be more on the incident response side, then a lot of that amounts to like malware, and it also amounts to like looking at different application logs and knowing what happened. So like I think NIST, that's NIST, that government, the American government agency, I believe, they have, I'm gonna be so mad if they're not American. I'm pretty sure they are though.
Yeah, NIST is.
Okay, great, thank you. It's just one of those things I don't really ever think about. I'm like, they are, right? So I've seen them put out like ISOs or like full images of computers that they have infected for teaching tools. So if you're really interested in DFIR stuff, which is digital forensic and incident response stuff, you can get those images that are like these have been hacked, more or less, right? And then you can take those, and they even have full reports over like what their people have done to them and like what they have found and where they found those findings. And you can more or less try your own DFIR skills on them and see if you find all the things they found. So that's another cool way to do it. And also, if you're interested in malware, there's tons of malware analysis stuff out there that you can get malware samples, try to reverse engineer it yourself, and see if you come to the same conclusions other researchers have in their reports that are freely available. But always be thinking about what's like a marketable skill. What can you like introduce to like, entity, whether it's like, if you want to work DHS has tons of cyber roles. So I'm FBI and I'm partial FBI because I'm biased, but the DHS has tons of openings, I believe, and even more openings coming up because of all the cyber issues that we've been having in our country. And so they're really up and coming as far as like they have a budget, they have tons of openings. So definitely look into DHS's roles for cyber stuff too.
Cool. Thanks, James. Patrick Sheehan asked, my understanding for special agents is they're assigned a random location. For non-special agents, do they apply to the location they wish to work at?
Yeah, so yeah, there's a lot of jokes that go on about special agents and how like there are their field offices selected for them. Some people like, yeah, if New York is above like the 50th spot, you're going to New York or something like that. Like, people have different like jokes about like where they get placed because sometimes it seems so random. So that is something like if you want to be an agent can be a really cool job, and if that's what you're into, that's awesome. Go for it, but be prepared to live literally anywhere, in the U.S. So as far as like the specialist position goes, it depends honestly, and that's been changing. So before, I know the staff operations specialist, which is a fun job. It's more like a tactical analyst, and that's not necessarily cyber related. I know that they have been able to like apply for certain offices. And then when it comes, but lately I don't think that's true anymore. I think you just have to apply to be an SOS, and then they more or less then, okay, and once you get a Quantico, they'll tell you what's available. When it comes to computer scientists, again, there's only like 120 of us. So even if you wanted to work in the Atlanta office, that's awesome. But we have 4 seats for computer scientists in the Atlanta office, and they're currently all full. So you'd have to wait. So really what you would do normally is if we have openings, like so, you can go to fbijobs.gov. I'll do that, jobs.gov. So you can go there and see what all openings we have available. And from there, there might be computer scientist position open, but I don't think it's going to say location. And then once you do that, you can get in the door, and then you might get reached out to by different field office saying, hey, we have an opening, and then they'll tell you what location they're in. But no, you can't directly just apply to a certain office, which is kind of a bummer, which makes it difficult for people to apply, which I wish was different, but it's the government. So that's what we have to deal with.
Awesome. Thanks, James. Does anyone have any other questions or discussion topics?
Yes, SANS is, I'm reading through the comments right now. SANS is very expensive. Yes, it is. And luckily, a lot of companies will pay for it once you get into companies that I've seen. So, and then so with the government, if you get a government job, a lot of government entities, especially military stuff, they have a healthy training budget. So what I lack in like income, I get tons of money for like training budget. So that's pretty great. I'll say that.
So what's the best sort of on-ramp for if somebody who may be looking for something that requires clearance?
Yeah, so you have to be, if you want any sort of like government job that requires like clearances, first of all, you have to be ready for everyone who's ever been in your life to be asked all sorts of questions about you. So have fun with that. It's not super fun, but it is what it is. And apart from that, you have to apply. A lot of people think that they like need to be recruited or something like that, and that's like hardly ever the case. Like really just apply and see what it is. And then a lot of these different entities, whether it's DHS, whether it's NIST, whether it's FBI, we'll like list what the requirements are. And if you have those requirements, you're probably a good candidate. Like I wasn't recruited to be in the FBI. I just applied because I thought it'd be awesome to work for the FBI, and here I am. And so it can't be that simple. I mean, it was a long process, and it was a lot of interviews, and like and I had the qualifications for it. But yeah, if you're interested, definitely just apply.
Thank you. Arshad asked, what type of activity or activities or history on social media profiles should we as employers track or check on if we're hiring someone?
That's up to you, I guess. What type of activities? What's the actual, Arshad, you're welcome to unmute if you want. I don't know what your actual concerns are here with your prospective employees. Maybe not. Patrick, do you might know, like, can you better steer that question or?
So it sounds like Arshad is
Yeah.
unmuted.
Oh,
So
great.
yeah, you can hear me.
Yep, I can hear you.
Yeah. So like you go for like interviews, right? I usually go online and check like what kind of like soft skills or like technical skills they look like. And nowadays, like if you're going in these kind of like government agencies, they keep track like the companies they have permission to keep track of your social media profile, like how you interacting, like post. So like do they check like if as a newcomer, if you're going to apply for the job, like how should we like we should post it on link, we should keep post on link, like LinkedIn profile and like Facebook, uh, Instagram, like so we should have like a lot of these like kind of social media presence, or like this was my question is like how should we interact.
I think it's totally, so as far as like you projecting that you like cyber skills and stuff like that on social media, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. That's a great way to learn from other people. You definitely, if you're applying for like FBI or NSA or CIA or any other like big government agency like that, I would not post about on social media that you're applying. There's just nothing good that can come of that as far as like the application process. So don't do that. But apart from that, I mean, like there's no good way to steer like how you present yourself. Like either you are a good fit or you're not. And aiming to be a kind of person on social media isn't going to help you, because eventually like who you are will be uncovered. So I guess that's what I'd say about that. But if you're worried about more like you just want to make sure that you're not disqualifying yourself from like talking about things related to cyber stuff, I think talking about cyber stuff is fine. Don't commit crimes, when it comes to cyber stuff. Don't be like, oh, look at this cool company that I hacked, that's bad. But apart from that, that's really all I got to say about that area of this, I believe.
Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you, Arshad. Porter has some really good questions.
Yeah.
How often do you see insider threats?
Yeah, it's definitely a thing. I was working a case just a few weeks ago in which like an insider threat, a disgruntled employee was a thing. And in this case, what happened was it appears that they had made like other logins for themselves. Like when they were fired and like they like, shut down that one login, they used the other login that they created for themselves to get back in. So that's a thing, and that's something you really have to be worried about. And so it's, when it comes to security, I mean, like people's like physical security and like their cybersecurity practices like really need to be hand in hand with each other and really know what the other one's doing, because insider threat is a real threat. People can be bitter and vengeful, and it's unfortunate, right? It really is, but yeah, that's a thing. So you really need I don't know, like, how do I put this? Sure, it can totally happen, right? But you also don't want to make people miserable by saying we're monitoring every last thing every last keystroke you're doing. Just be aware that insider threat is a real threat and it does happen. And then act accordingly with your company's posture on that.
Cool. Hector asked over in the chat, I had a few negative managers. Can that disqualify me from a background check?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. You can just, I mean, you can always apply and see what happens, right? But I mean, the worst case that can happen is you don't make it through. But I don't know. I don't know what actually. I mean, I know obviously if like you're a part of a terrorist organization, clearly that disqualifies you, right? If you're like a felon, yeah, that disqualifies you. But I don't know exactly where the line is and what disqualifies someone and like doesn't. I don't know if that would make that mark or not.
Hector, on that one, I will say that I don't know that is going to hit you on a background check as much as it will on the reference, which I guess is part of your background. But I think a reference check is probably, is where that's going to maybe affect you, but most of the time though, I think that there may actually be some protections, at least in some states, against them torpedoing you in a job search. I don't know about Georgia, but
I don't know either. I don't know. We're coming up in the end here, and I just want to kind of emphasize a few points here. First of all, I didn't talk about BEC too much with business email compromise. I did talk about earlier how like all this cybercrime stuff that's going on right now, it's all it's financially motivated crimes. Pretty much all of it is financially motivated in one form or another, especially when it comes to the criminal side of it all, financially motivated. That being said, BEC is one of the best bangs for the buck when it comes to being a criminal. It's not as sexy as like ransomware or like, dropping a 0-day to hack into someone's network or whatever, but it is really, really effective. Just tricking someone into getting in the middle between a wire transfer and then taking a bunch of money, then sending it overseas. That happens a lot. There is so much money being lost in America right now from being victims of BEC, and there's no shame in it, right? Anyone can be a victim of a BEC. It happens to everyone. But if it happens to you, you have to immediately let law enforcement know. Immediately go to ic3.gov and let us know. There is a chance that we might be able to help with banks in the States. I'm not saying we can, but there is a chance we can help you. But if you, like 3 months after the fact, you're like, oh yeah, accidentally wired $1 million overseas, like that's awful. Like, that happens a lot. Well, we just need to know as soon as we can so we can try to help you. Other than that, I said it before, I believe, but like we can't do our jobs effectively without your help. Without knowing what's happening in your world, without knowing if you're compromised or if you've been hacked or if you're targeted, we can't help you, but we want to. So you really need to reach out to us. Please make that first contact with us. Let us know what's going on, and we're happy to help you out if something should happen to you. And if you're like if you're any sort of like energy sector, or if you're some sort of utility, entity, if you don't think nation states are looking at you as a target, that's probably not true. They probably are. A lot of these smaller energy companies too, like some of them don't have great infrastructure to them, and then nation states know that, and they're looking at you as targets. This is not a good time to not be prepared in cybersecurity. So especially if you're in one of those sectors, reach out to us, reach out to DHS, let us know you exist, let us know that you're like looking at your stuff, and so that we can go ahead and make that contact. And God forbid if something happens to you in the future, at least we know each other by name and we can help you out easier in the future.
absolutely.
Yeah. Any other questions to finish this up, or?
I have one question. About like if you see like job descriptions, apply for the jobs. This question I asked like few recruiters as well, but I didn't get any kind of and I searched online as well. You see, if you apply for the government agencies like FBI and like the top level, there is at the end it says the top levels and the secret clearance and DoD. Like how you get these? Like I'm working on my certs. I have completed my education, like networking. I know will do next like cybersecurity plus, but I asked the recruiter how I would do that. Like how would I pass? Like that DoD or what is actually this?
Oh yeah, okay,
And
that's
she
a fair
didn't
question.
even like.
Yeah.
So if you throw a light on that, thank you.
So when it comes to like needing certain clearances or what have you, when it comes to the bigger government agencies, we each have our own process of clearing people for certain security levels. And so like we don't, generally speaking, you're not expected to have those clearances unless you're a contractor. You're not expected to have those clearances coming into a job. You would apply for the job, and I say this from my experience. The way I know it works is that you apply for these jobs, and then if you are a good candidate for the job, then they will put you through all the background check stuff to see if your background passes, and then they'll do all the security clearance stuff to see if you And it's pretty much the most invasive background check you'll ever have. And just be ready for that. But yeah, they'll do all of that themselves. And so applying for one of these jobs, for me, it was like 2 years from when I put in my application to when I got my job, because that's how long it took for my background check to clear. And that being said, my mom is a school teacher and my dad's a carpenter, and they've lived, we've always lived in Georgia. Like, why my background check took 2 years, I have no idea. But if that gives you any indication of like how long this process is, that's a good benchmark.
Wow, 2 years.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Arshad. Well, we are at 9 o'clock or whatever time it is in whatever time zone you're in. I want to say thank you to James deGrood for joining us and answering a lot of questions. And I want to thank everybody for all the questions you put in.
Yeah, thank you.
Really good questions, really great discussion. And I want to remind everybody that next week we also have another webinar Wednesday that is being hosted by Lee John in the Toronto chapter. It's called Managing Who Has Access to Your Cloud Environment, Who is Actually Logging In. Speaker is Jake King, and that's at 7 Eastern Time, 4 Pacific, next Wednesday.
Yeah, come on.
Sorry, it's 8 Eastern.
17th. Oh, it's 8. Thank you. And yeah, so that'll be about managing access to your cloud environment and knowing who's actually logging in. And that'll be great. Thank you for joining us. And I think that covers it.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, everyone.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, James.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye.